I so want people to see me as someone who produces, as somebody who's smart, as somebody who's hardworking, that I'm ignoring signs of exhaustion.
Failure is the key to everything you want?
Ooh, yeah. I believe that. Yeah. I think it is underrated failure. I think failure is so underrated. People like it, especially to myself. Like I'm someone who was always very afraid of failure, who's always afraid of looking bad, looking dumb. I always wanted to like not ruffle any feathers, just be perfect. And you don't learn anything from that. All you learn is to be more rigid. All you learn is to seek more perfection and more, whatever it is that more safety. I think you're seeking more safety in not messing up and not making mistakes. But all of the lessons are in failure. Everything is there. All the information is in failure. Even in starting Working Writer, I've had so many like failures starting Working Writer and so much to learn. And like, whether it's like struggling, having to realize that I'm going to have to put myself out there if I want to make this successful because people need to know about it, and not doing that for the first year. And then like, almost being like, should I even continue this? Like that felt like a failure almost. But if I didn't have that experience of not getting any sales for the Working Writer course because I'm not putting myself out there, I wouldn't have had to put myself out there. Like all the information is in things not working. It also, I think, is necessary for our minds because I think that like our minds work in a way that like I think our minds crave fixing, especially as a writer. Like I feel like my mind likes puzzles. My mind likes to figure things out. And instead of seeing that failure the first year of Working Writer as a death sentence or as a personal, comment on my own ability, I could see it as something that was beckoning me to grow, to open up, to be in front. Now I'm like, oh, I'm so glad that happened because it's led me here to you guys. So it's just like, I just think that failure is something, if you're someone who is avoiding failure, if you're someone who's afraid of failure, failure definitely can suck. It can not feel great. But I think that the best stuff is behind failure, truly. It really is. Success is awesome. It feels great, but you only get there through the failures. Like there is no success without failure. And you might as well enjoy the process, enjoy the journey, take the failure as the very fantastic opportunity that it is to learn a lesson, to learn what you need to know. There's no other way to say it. It's like failure is not always fun, but it is necessary.
What is failure exactly?
I mean, I think that there are very clear ways to determine failure. For me, for Working Writer, it is, for the course, it is being able to turn it into a business. For the podcast, it's being able to turn it into a business that is profitable. And in order to do that, it has to be valuable to people. In order to do that, it has to bring value. And so the way that I recognize whether or not it is succeeding is the way that I recognize whether or not it is succeeding in being valuable to people is if it is making a profit. So if it's not making a profit, then something's wrong. I'm failing at giving value. So that to me is cut and dry. Like, but if you don't get into, let's say, a screenwriting competition, or if you don't win one or something like that, to me that is failure, but failure is information. Like once again, so what kind of information are you getting? Are you getting information that your writing wasn't up to snuff as good as the people that did win? Or is it just that these people were just more original this year? It's still information ultimately. So I guess I think the answer is failure is information.
You talked about wanting to be the perfect student, sitting in the front of the class and always wanting to do the right thing. Do you think it sometimes helps to have a chip on your shoulder, though? I know that can be looked at as too rebellious or negative, but do you think it's a good driver to really be like, you know what, I'm so pissed right now and I'm going to prove that this is not the case? Instead of being the perfect, this is like a little bit more of a messy motivation.
I don't necessarily think it's about like having a chip on your shoulder, but I definitely think it's about having a strong opinion, having a point of view. You know, like I think that the times that I have spoken up, if I'm against something or if I don't know. I think the things that I speak up the most about are about how I think we should treat each other as a society, is how respectful we should be of each other as human beings. And I don't think that that's a chip. I think that's like a point of view. That is something that I deeply believe in.
What does it mean to you to be perfect?
Now, I think to be perfect is to be overwhelmed. Now I have all kinds of negative connotations with perfectionism. You know, before I used to think it's like about, appearing well, whether that means what you're wearing, appearing as if nothing's wrong in your life and everything's hunky-dory. But now I find perfectionism to be an absolute trap. I think perfectionism is not good for our psyches. I think it overwhelms us. I think it puts us in, a very bad position to live healthy lives. So I don't have a good. I think perfectionism is overwhelm.
Did you see Ingrid Goes West?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I love that film.
Love that movie.
It is so amazing because you have one character whose life is a total train wreck and is scrolling and thinks that is the goal right there. And it's just, I mean, it's a funny movie, but it's also a very sad movie because I think it happens a lot.
Absolutely. It's one of the reasons why I try to talk about my failures. I try to talk about perfectionism because I just think that what we create with this perfectionism box that we're putting everybody in is just a very restrictive life. Like we're really restricting ourselves to what life can look like. And I just personally don't have the desire or the energy to live that way anymore. I also think, perfectionism is a trauma response. It can be a trauma response. I had a really bad burnout a few years ago at the end of 2019. And just like the nerd that I am, I started doing a lot of reading about burnout. I started trying to figure out what was going on. It's what led me to Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach, was this burnout, this just feeling that I couldn't do anything. Like when I was burnt out, I could not produce. And so it forced me to really face this need to produce and this perfectionism that I have, this like deathly fear that I have of being seen as someone who is weak or as dumb or as lazy, even though I am kind of lazy, which is fine. I did not want anybody to perceive me that way. And ultimately led to burnout. And the reading that I did, I ended up reading books like Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. I ended up reading Not Nice by Aziz Gazipura, which is a great book about self-compassion. Both of these books are both about self-compassion, and both of them are about self-confidence as well. And then I read some other books, and one of the books I read, I can't really remember the name of it right now, but it basically talks about how perfectionism is a trauma response. It's something that we do because perfectionism was what we had to do when we were young to keep ourselves safe. Whether it meant being perfectly behaved for your parents, whether it meant like being the teacher's or being the teacher's pet, or whatever it is that you had to do in your life to overcompensate, to be seen, for whatever it is that you had to do. And now in adulthood, I'm doing the same thing, and it's leading to overwhelm. I'm such a perfectionist. I have such low self-worth that I so want people to see me as someone who produces, as somebody who's smart, as somebody who's hardworking, that I'm ignoring signs of exhaustion. I'm ignoring, I'm like on this treadmill of like nonstop work. I'm ignoring my personal connections, my relationships with my family and with my friends. I'm missing out on events, on people's weddings because I need to, I can't get out of work. I won't even ask to get out of work because I'm afraid to ask to get out of work because then I might get fired. Like, and those are very real fears, but just the exhaustion that perfectionism led to, and just knowing that this striving is coming from an emptiness. It's coming from a sadness. It's coming from something that needs to be healed from my earlier years of just never feeling like enough. And like that burnout kind of forced me to just sit and do nothing for like 2 years. I think it took me 2 years to really feel like I could do stuff again. And it was a really necessary time because it was all this unwinding of this perfectionism.
I think you talked about it on one of your podcasts with another fellow female writer that I think you're doing a class with. Mm-hmm. And I think she talked about how having it all actually felt very stressful because now we're being given these images. I mean, I don't have children, but of how to have it all, and you can be a mom, you can do this. And it actually felt like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. This is not what I envisioned it to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that having it all just looks very different now. Like, I think in the past, maybe having it all didn't require, at least for women in particular, to be both career juggernaut and mom. And both of these things are huge endeavors, and we're human. And maybe some people can do it, and that's great for them. But it's definitely not something that I think is doable for everyone, nor should everyone be doing it. I think it's extremely exhausting and it's very difficult. But at the same time, it's extremely expensive to raise children right now. So you kind of have to both be working, and you kind of have to be a career juggernaut if you want to raise your kids the kind of way that you want to raise them, with the things that you want them to have, or to even afford the things that you want to have, like a house and school and things like that. So it's like, I think the United States in particular makes it very difficult on women, because women are always the ones that have to be the caretakers of the nuclear family, the extended family. I think that caretaking role sometimes extends into the workplace for a lot of women. I've seen that a lot. And I'm just like, I've taken off that hat. I'm not doing it. I'll be like a man. I'll do one thing. And that's fine. And that's enough.
Yeah, I was watching some different videos about, mom influencers, and imagine that pressure, because you're doing all those things you talked about, but then you also have to present yourself online. Absolutely. As if everything's perfect. And unfortunately, there's been some very sad stories where it didn't end up that way for people, and just the pressure that we're all kind of on. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about is how is it in the entertainment industry when we're always looking up? We're always looking to level up, and it seems like we're never actually happy with where we are.
Oh my God, I literally was just having lunch with one of my friends who just finished like a Marvel movie, a show. I think she just finished she's done amazing things, and she's like, but what about the next thing? I don't know what the next thing is. And I was just like, it's always going to be about the next thing. You know what I mean? Like, who cares? It doesn't matter about the next thing. Like, you've done amazing things. And I think that, that's what our industry perpetuates. It perpetuates that, like, you're only as good as, like, your last 3 projects, or, like, what's next on the slate. And I just think that, like, we don't need to buy into it so much. I think it's hard not to buy into it, but I definitely think it is not mentally healthy, because then we don't celebrate our wins. We don't actually enjoy the success that we have. And I'm guilty of this too. I'm guilty of, I could have just finished, a I'm a producer on a TV show, and then the show ends, and then I'm like panicking, like, what do I do next? What's next? And mind you, I have money, I have savings, and, you know, I've worked, but, you know, your reps are giving you pressure. Like, everybody's making you feel like you have to have the next thing. And I really want to normalize breaks after projects. I think it's good to like refill your cup after a project, get to bask in the experience, in the reality that I just did something really, really cool, possibly something I never thought I would get to do. What a fantastic experience. And that be enough, and that be okay. Because I think even in that podcast episode that we're talking about, she says something about like the journey is all there is, or something like that, or like
the hustle never stops.
That never stops, or something like that. It just never
good.
stops. And it's like I think that this obsession and this fear about the future is, I just think it can like really kill the present. And I think that because we live in kind of a fleeting society where everything goes by really, really fast, I think it's like really important to savor things. And that includes booking big jobs and being happy that you booked it and that you got the experience, and not freaking out when it ends, even though that happens and that's totally normal and that's totally fine. But I just think that celebrating our wins is really important. And I think sometimes when we let our panic set in about the next thing, it really robs the present of joy, of satisfaction, of contentment with where you are, not where you're gonna be. And I just kind of think that like what I realized was like no matter what level I got to, you know, before I broke in, I was like, I just want to break in. And then after I broke in, I was like, I just want that next thing. And like, I just want that next thing. It doesn't ever go away. The only satisfaction you get is in the doing, in the present. That striving never goes away. So I've had to just get comfortable with that feeling of, I don't know what comes next, but I know that I did this and this was fantastic, and I'm going to be satisfied with that for now.